In The Godfather, we follow Don Vito Corleone, head of the Corleone crime family, as he looks to transfer control of his empire to his reluctant son, Michael. Vito is the head of the family, and under him are his two capo regimes, Peter Clemenza and Salvatore Tessio, and Vito's eldest son, Sonny, is the underboss. In an unorthodox move, Vito makes the German-Irish Tom Hagen his consigliere and advisor, a lawyer who the Corleones took in as a child and raised as one of their own. Tom's inexperience and naivety as a wartime consigliere is brought up by Sonny in the film, and later Michael. And though he is clearly an effective attorney, his limitations are clear in the film, such as being unable to convince the Hollywood producer via diplomatic means to give Johnny Fontaine the film role he was after, leading the Corleones to up the ante and send in Luca Brasi to give the producer a more direct message, as the book tells us. Tom also failed to spot that it was Barzini all along, which took Vito a single meeting with the other families, and he also suspected that Clemenza would be the one to betray the family, not Tessio. Sonny laments Tom's weakness, saying, "Pop had Genco and look what I got." Genco, Abbandando, is name-dropped in the first film, but we don't see him until the second. Raised in Hell's Kitchen, Genco is friends with Vito Corleone and works at his father's grocery store. The two bond over their shared experiences of hardship and survival. Genco has a crush on an actress, but when he goes backstage to see her, his fear of Don Fanucci stops him. The hatred of Fanucci is amplified when, because of him, Vito loses his job at the grocery. When Vito kills Fanucci, he gains the respect of those around him, including Genco. Together, along with Tessio and Clemenza, they rise in stature, going into the olive oil business. Vito even names the front company Genco Puro after his friend. Genco serves Vito loyally and proves a capable and shrewd underling. His wise counsel, loyalty, and strategic thinking made him invaluable to Vito, especially in the family's earlier years. In his role as consigliere, Genco provides Vito with advice on family affairs and negotiations, acting as a mediator and strategist. His position makes him one of the family's most trusted members, as the consigliere serves both advisor and the voice of reason to the Don, managing delicate situations and conflicts. The book tells us that Vito always wanted Genco at meetings to ensure nothing slips through the cracks. You know, when I first watched the Godfather films, I was a kid, and for some reason, I assumed that Genco in the Godfather Part 2 scenes was actually a young Tessio. Don't ask me who I thought young Tessio was, I don't know. I must have thought he was just a random guy. But when I realised this wasn't the case, it did start to beg the question upon rewatches. Tessio and Clemenza are in Part 1, so what happened to Genco? The easiest assumption to make is that he must have died off screen, but this isn't actually the case. He is actually alive during the events of the first film, and there is a minor subplot dedicated to Don Corleone and his sons visiting Genco in hospital, but these scenes were deleted. It appears that Genco remained an active advisor until he got cancer, after which he became bedridden and unable to continue his services. Almost every reference to Genco is removed from the first film, aside from Sonny's line, but in a deleted scene, he's spoken about during Connie's wedding, after the Don says, "Now if there's nothing else, I'd like to go to my daughter's wedding." Tom then brings up Genco.
The hospital called. Consigliere Genco. He's not going to last out the night.
Santino, go tell your brothers that I want them to come with me to visit Genco and pay their respects. Tell Fredo to drive the big car and ask Johnny to come.
Pup, Michael?
All my sons.
Whilst the sons are about to get in the car, Vito approaches the aloof and distant Michael.
Will your American girlfriend get back to the city all right?
Tom said he'd take her in.
And later the two have a talk in the hospital before they reach Genco's room.
What are all these Christmas ribbons for?
For bravery.
What miracles you do for strangers? Just a minute, Michael. I want to talk to you. What are your plans when you get out?
Finish school.
That's fine. I approve of that. Michael, you never come to me as a son should. You know that, don't you? But when you finish school, I want you to come and talk to me because I have plans for you. You understand?
Now this scene is more about Vito and Michael, but as it's set in the hospital, Unless they refilmed it at another location, director Francis Ford Coppola would have to axe it, given we would need a reason why our two main characters are randomly in a hospital. It's an interesting scene. I don't want to talk too much about it here because our focus today is on Genco, but the emotional distance between Vito and Michael is clear. Vito laments Michael's coldness and he attempts to reach out, and at the same time he criticizes Michael's efforts for fighting in the war for the States. It's interesting to see, but I think it works better as a deleted scene. Michael and Vito not seeing eye to eye, having different visions for Michael and his future, is one of the central themes of the movie, but it's always unspoken, instead being there under the surface. It's weird and too on the nose to hear these things being said out loud. Plus, for there to be two scenes back to back of Michael and Vito talking so much early in the film is strange, and it kind of takes away from that later scene in the garden. Then the Corleones enter Genco's room, where Vito's larger-than-life stature and power seems to even convince the dying Genco that the Don can get the better of death.
Genco. Genco. I brought all my boys to pay their respects. Even Johnny from Hollywood. Godfather. Godfather. It is your daughter's wedding day. You cannot refuse me. Cure me. You have the power. Genco, I have no such power. But don't be afraid of that. It has been arranged then? You blaspheme. But you need your Consigliere, who will replace me. Stay with me, Godfather. Help me to meet death. If he sees you, he'll be frightened and leave me in peace. You can say a word, pull few strings, eh? Stay with me, Godfather. Don't betray me.
Vito then waves his sons away and stays with Genco until his last breath. It's quite a touching and poignant scene, almost like for like to the scene it's based on in Mario Puzo's novel, and for it to appear so early in the film tells us much about Vito and Genco. Vito declares that Genco is blaspheming and tells him to resign himself to his death, showing he has his limits, both in terms of what he can do and what he will tolerate to hear. But the mere fact that the delirious Genco is able to propose that Vito could cure him or cheat death is a suggestion for us as to how far Don Corleone's power stretches, something emphasized a few scenes later when we see that he can even get to a big-time Hollywood producer. The bond between the two men is clear, Vito's respect for his old friend evident by the fact that he brings all of his sons. Perhaps if it was a lesser man, Michael would have refused to go, but it highlights that Genco must have been an important figure in the children's lives also, for everyone to turn up. As to why it was deleted, who knows? It does bring a bit of a halt to the pacing as it takes place between the wedding and Tom's trip to LA. I don't think it was that necessary to keep, given there's already so many characters in the movie introduced early on. I wonder if Coppola knew that he would be making a part 2 to the movie in which Genco would be featured much more, the bond between the two men on display, and thus Genco's death having more gravitas, whether he would have decided to keep it in the first film. At the time, it may have been considered extra fat, a send-off to a character we don't know anything about. I like to think that if the scene was included in the movie, it would have made other parts of the movie make more sense. For example, a lot of people find it to have been a terrible decision for Vito to send Luca Brasi to infiltrate the Tartaglias, as it's so obvious that Luca would never betray Vito, something we've discussed in a previous video. But if this scene was kept in, maybe audiences would determine that the reason why Vito's decision making isn't at its best is because he's lost his intelligent and wise advisor. Don Corleone says he has bought all of his sons and yet Tom is not there, which speaks to Tom's unconventional place in the family. Perhaps Vito knew that an old-fashioned moustache Pete like Genco would not consider Tom like the others. He wasn't one of us, he wasn't Italian, as Nicky says in Martin Scorsese's Casino. And with Tom having already started to take Genco's duties, maybe the Don wisely felt it would be in poor taste to bring Genco's replacement along with him to the old man's deathbed. Keeping this scene would also allow for a huge contrast between Vito and Michael as the heads of the family. Does Michael have anyone around him who would have as much trust in him as Genco does for Vito here? There's a warmth and humanity about Vito and Genco, in spite of all the crimes they have committed, and it's something lacking during Michael's reign. There's also something symbolic about this scene, with Genco being the old guard making way for the new, a pure-blooded Sicilian making way for a German-Irish. It signals the end of the old days and the beginning of the new ways of doing things. Characters like Solozzo, for example, accusing Vito of being old-fashioned. This is the day of Don Vito's daughter's wedding, a day when he cannot refuse requests, a day where we've seen him grant numerous requests, but here's one that he can't fulfill, something he can't do, a sign of things to come, a sign of the waning power of the Don. And of all the people the Don must refuse, who he cannot help, it's his oldest, closest friend. So what do you make of Genco Abbandando? Would you have liked to see more of him? Do you think the deleted scenes should have been kept in the film? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.